the main story in town tonight, you all know by now, it's a massive night tonight, of course, for football. And there's been a terror threat made against one of the biggest matches that's happening. The Met Police has spoken out, saying it has a robust policing plan. Of course, I'm speaking about the Champions League match here in London. There's also another game taking place in Spain. This is all apparently off the back of a terror threat from Islamic State. Now I can cross live to our reporter, Charlie Peters. He's there on the ground outside the Emirates. Charlie, good evening to you. Bring us up to speed, if you will.
So the terror threat across Britain is substantial, and that threat has remained in place after an ISIS-aligned media outlet has made a series of threats against the football matches occurring tonight and tomorrow in the Champions League. This is Arsenal's first quarter-final in the competition since 2010. But the main story here isn't necessarily the football, but that security threat. The Met said this afternoon that in collaboration with counter-terrorism police, they did have a robust plan in place to reassure the public, but at the same time, they have asked fans here to be vigilant and report anything that they see that is suspicious. Speaking to cops here, they've all said that this is the standard police presence for a fixture of this profile. Nothing additional or special has been put on in light of that threat. And I also spoke to some fans at the ground earlier as they gathered for this match, who said that they did not fear the ISIS threat and were looking forward to the match.
Slightly nervous, I guess, but you can't let these people ruin your lives. So, you know, it's a big quarter-final. We're not having a quarter-final with Arsenal since 2010, so you know, you can't not go as a result. So yeah,
because I saw a lot of news about ISIS, about terrorism, and lots of them, nearly 90% of them are fake. So you know, London is a great city. I trust in the officers, the safety guys. So yeah.
Grand, you know, I've come over from Ireland today and I used to live here and we had threats growing up, and you just have to get on with life, and just you can walk down the street and anything can happen to you, so you just have to keep going and hope for the best.
Well, those fans are undeterred by the threat reportedly from an ISIS-aligned media outlet. This is, as they've said, Arsenal's first quarter-final in the competition since 2010, and they're hoping that it's football that takes the headlines tonight.
Charlie Peters, thank you very much for that. Mark, you are a football fan by your own description there. Let me ask you first of all, do you think, and I mean, just in case you're not fully up to speed with the threat, who's making it and all the rest of it, worry not, because after the break I'll be going also as well to Mark White, our Home and Securities editor. He will be going into a lot more detail about who's been making what threats and what it means more broadly as well, beyond just the UK. But for now, let me just stick with these UK matches. Do you think actually these matches should have gone ahead still?
Yes, I do, on the face of it. I mean, a judgment has to be made. Of course, everybody's reporting that our terror threat level is substantial, but I just looked up, it's been substantial or severe every day since March 2019. If the authorities thought that there was an unstoppable clear and present danger here, my assumption is that they would have cancelled the game. I hope, however, that the security is rather better than it was at a match that I went to 3 years ago, the Italy versus England Euro final at Wembley. The security was a shambles. Thousands of people got into the stadium without tickets. So I'm rather hoping that the Emirates security now in 2024 is enormously better than the Wembley Stadium security in 2021. Because it's damn difficult to check, 50, 60,000 bags
Indeed.
And jackets and all of the rest of it. But I would still go. I rather admire the keep calm and carry on attitude of those Arsenal fans. But I guess they're self-selecting, right? You wouldn't have found anybody at the Emirates who said, no, I've decided not to go after all. They'll be at home on their sofa.
That's a very good point, actually. Or maybe you might have been, if you went to some of the pubs, that's where you'd find me, quite frankly, in the run-up to the match, I must confess. But I wonder if there was people in there that were perhaps going to go to the stadium but decided to stay in the pub. Would you have gone to that match tonight if you had tickets? Of course, there's matches as well tomorrow. You might be getting on a flight and going over there. Would this change your plans or not? Ella Whelan, where are you?
I mean, a lot of people will be going to those matches just because they love football and won't want to pay attention. But I actually think it's in a way a political act of defiance going, quite an important one. I would go.
Would you?
Because there's, like Mark said, with the qualifier of not being, no one wants to be silly, or, you know, if you trust the police know what they're doing to a certain extent. But, you know, 80% of these kind of announcements from IS or Islamist-related groups are about the effect they'll have rather than even the action. A lot of the time, they don't actually carry out an attack. The hope is that they will cause enough terror, enough fear and disruption to change the way we live our lives. Because let's remember, the reason why they're threatening us as Western civilization is because they think it's awful that we live freely, go to football matches, have fun, that teenagers turn up at an Ariana Grande concert and dance with joy. They think all of that is awful and they want to put a stop to that. So part of the tactic is to try to stop us from doing it. And I think we have to be, as much as possible, really defiant against that and say, no, you will not change the way we live. Again, qualified by no one wants to be a martyr, certainly, and not want to put people's lives in danger. But I think it's quite an important, political act to say, I will not be cowed by this kind of terror.
See, I don't know what I would think. I mean, I know you've got a little one, probably too little to take to a football match, perhaps, at this stage. But then I wonder if you've taken kids, because football is actually quite a family sport, isn't it? You go with your families, you take your kids along, and, you know, it's all good fun and all the rest of it. And then I think, would you take your kids along to somewhere that's apparently been threatened?
Well, I think, like Mark says, there has been, I mean, the sort of discussion about extremism and terror threat levels are, I'm not saying they're irrelevant, but it has been broadened. Maybe we get on to talk about this. It has the definition of what qualifies raising a terror threat and what qualifies as extremist has been broadened out to a point in which I'm not so nervous when people use that kind of language, because a lot of the time it doesn't mean that, for example, someone who might want to commit an act of violence, suicide bomb or stabbing, the rest of it, is immediately present. It might be something else. And so I think it's not quite that I'm saying the government has been crying wolf for a long time, but there is an element of a sort of an unserious approach to the issue of Islamism and terrorism that I think probably would make me feel a little bit safer in a way, which, you know, has its own problems, because we should have a system which treats it very seriously, as a very high threshold, and which is very clear to citizens when the police or government says the terror threat is high, you should avoid this area, and people will then obey in a way that keeps everyone safe. But I think at the moment it's so muddy, it's hard to know when what you should take seriously and what you shouldn't.
Mark?
Yeah, that's exactly right. I mean, you start to get inured to these things, don't you? If you are told every day that the terror threat is substantial or severe, every day for 4 or 5 years, I mean, unless you're going to just lock yourself in your own home, what are you supposed to do? And I often find the guidance that you get is not particularly helpful. You know, we're often told to be alert but not alarmed. I mean, I'm not entirely sure what that means. I'd like to think I'm always alert but not alarmed. I'm not sure how we should change our behaviour, really. And I completely agree with Ella that if you're going to say it's substantial or severe every day, at some point people stop listening.
We also, I mean, remember that in 2017, 2018, 2019, there were attacks by Islamists on London Bridge, on Westminster Bridge, people driving cars into people on the street being stabbed. And that's not to say we should stay at home and become, hermits, because it could happen everywhere. But it's a bit like what the woman at the end of Charlie, one of the fans at the end of Charlie's report said. What am I going to do? Just not live my life? Yeah. Well, you have to have some sense of proportion and say there is a problem. Islamism is an issue that I really wish politicians would talk about more openly and take more seriously. But it is not something that I think should change the way that we as relatively free citizens in the West should live our lives.
I mean, my guess would be this. I know we're about to hear from GBNews' security expert, Michelle, but my guess would be this. It's only my guess. I'm not an expert here. That if you're announcing in advance that these stadia are targets, that's likely that you're trying to actually cause disruption to the matches and get them cancelled. Presumably, if you really were thinking of targeting the Emirates Stadium tonight, you wouldn't announce it on a TV channel several hours beforehand. I mean, that's my best guess. You would not want the authorities to get forewarning. So my view is they're trying to be disruptive in this particular instance, and we should refuse to be disrupted by them.
I think that's a very good point, actually. And I will be going to Mark White after the break. But there's lots I want to unpick with you guys